Carl Jung's The Shadow. Become who you are afraid to be. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Carl Jung. In today's video on spiritual wisdom, we dive into one of Jung's most powerful teachings, the shadow. This isn't just theory. It's a no BS guide to uncovering the parts of yourself you've been avoiding, denying, or afraid to face. Because true personal growth doesn't come from pretending to be light, it comes from embracing your darkness. If you're ready to stop running and start transforming, you're in the right place. Comment below. I am ready to become who I was born to be. Let's begin this powerful journey inward together. 1. What is the shadow? Carl Jung's concept of the shadow represents the unconscious part of our psyche, made up of desires, fears, impulses, and traits we have rejected, repressed, or disowned due to shame, fear, or societal conditioning. These parts of us often include things we were told not to feel or express: anger, selfishness, ambition, jealousy, pride, even deep sadness. Over time, what doesn't fit the image we try to uphold gets pushed into the background of our being. But what we push down doesn't disappear. It gains power. The more we try to ignore or suppress the shadow, the more control it exerts over us in silence. It begins to influence our behaviors, emotional reactions, and relationships without us realizing it. An unacknowledged fear of inadequacy might lead us to seek constant approval. A hidden rage could bleed into our tone with loved ones. A repressed longing for freedom may cause us to sabotage commitments. What feels like just how we are is often a reflection of what we haven't healed. This is the trap. We become driven by what we've never faced. Jung warned that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. That's why doing shadow work isn't about fixing yourself. It's about finally seeing yourself. And that kind of clarity is the beginning of spiritual wisdom. It invites us to step off autopilot and become aware of the inner forces shaping our outer reality. One of the most common ways the shadow reveals itself is through projection. We see in others what we can't accept in ourselves. Someone's confidence might irritate us because we've buried our own voice. Someone's laziness might trigger us because we secretly fear slowing down. Judgment becomes a mirror for unhealed wounds. What we condemn, mock, or fear in others is often what we haven't fully faced within. As painful as that truth may be, it's also liberating because it shows us exactly where to begin the work. From a spiritual perspective, the shadow isn't here to be punished. It's here to be understood. It holds not just our wounds, but also our potential. Buried beneath our shame is courage. Beneath our anger is a call for boundaries. Beneath our jealousy is a desire to be seen. The shadow contains the raw material of transformation if we are brave enough to stop hiding from it. Doing this inner work requires emotional maturity and spiritual courage. It asks us to stop blaming the world and start exploring our own inner terrain. And in doing so, we begin to reclaim parts of ourselves that we thought were lost. Our clarity, our voice, our emotional truth, our spiritual power. This is where healing deepens into growth, and growth becomes embodiment. That's what spiritual wisdom is. The ability to hold the light and the dark in one hand and walk forward, integrated, whole, and free. Have you ever explored the parts of yourself you usually hide the emotions, fears, or desires buried deep within? If so, share what you've discovered in the comments so others can reflect too. If not, comment, "I'm ready to meet my shadow," and let's walk this path of self-awareness together. 2. Personal versus collective shadow. The personal shadow is made up of the parts of yourself you were taught to hide: anger, ambition, sadness, even joy. Maybe you were told it's wrong to be too loud, too sensitive, too emotional, or too proud. So you push those traits down. But what's hidden isn't gone. It simply moves to the unconscious. And from there, it controls your choices, your reactions, and even your relationships. You find yourself triggered by others without knowing why. You overreact or you shut down. This isn't random. It's the shadow speaking, asking to be seen, understood, and reintegrated. Carl Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." The shadow isn't your enemy. It's the part of you longing to return home. But shadow work isn't just personal. It's collective. Entire cultures also have shadows, unspoken fears, buried shame, and suppressed truths passed down through generations. A society that glorifies control and suppresses emotion teaches its people to numb their hearts. A culture built on domination and division teaches its people to mistrust difference. These patterns create the collective shadow, a vast reservoir of denied truths and unresolved pain that affects how we treat others, how we raise children, and how we see the world. You may not even know you've inherited it, but it lives in the way you think, feel, and act every day. Just as the personal shadow hides your individual traits, the collective shadow hides the blind spots of a society, and both require deep awareness to heal. Spiritual awakening is not about escaping the shadow, but walking through it. You begin to see how your emotional patterns aren't really yours, they were programmed. You realize that many of your beliefs were never chosen, they were inherited. And suddenly, healing becomes possible. You stop blaming others and start recognizing the mirrors. You stop running from the uncomfortable and start listening to what it's trying to teach you. True spiritual wisdom comes not from pretending to be perfect, but from owning your full self, even the parts you once rejected. When you reclaim your shadow, you reclaim your power. You take back your voice, your energy, and your ability to choose who you want to become, not who you were taught to be. And when you recognize the collective shadow, you become a conscious force for change, no longer repeating history, but reshaping it. The spiritual path isn't always light and peace. It's messy, raw, and deeply human. But it's in the darkest places that the light of truth shines the brightest. The shadow doesn't need to be feared. It needs to be honored as the gateway to wholeness. If you're ready to explore both your personal and collective shadows with honesty and courage, comment below. I am ready to see what's been hidden. Let's grow in awareness together. 3. How shadow manifests, projection, and triggers. When we feel an intense dislike towards someone, it often says more about us than it does about them. Carl Jung taught that the traits we reject in ourselves are the very ones we tend to see often exaggerated in other people. This psychological mechanism is called projection. When we project, we unconsciously transfer our own disowned traits, fears, or desires onto others. That loud, boastful coworker, he might be reflecting the confidence we were never allowed to express. That friend who's always in the spotlight, she might be mirroring the part of us that longs to be seen. Everything that irritates us about others, Jung said, can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. It's not just philosophy, it's a blueprint for healing. Emotional triggers operate in the same way. Whenever we feel an overreaction, anger, jealousy, even intense admiration, it's not the surface event that causes it. It's the echo of something deeper. Triggers point to wounds we've buried and identities we've been taught to suppress. For example, if praise for someone else's success fills you with resentment, that resentment might be pointing to your own unmet need for recognition. If someone's freedom makes you feel uneasy, perhaps it's your own inner craving for liberation trying to rise. Triggers aren't signs of weakness. They are invitations. They ask you to look at the part of yourself you've locked away in order to survive. In daily life, projection and triggering form a mirror we can't escape. The people we judge, the ones we envy, even the ones we idolize, they are all reflecting some hidden part of us. This mirroring isn't meant to shame us. It's meant to wake us up. One woman, for instance, hated a colleague who constantly talked about his achievements, but beneath her annoyance was sadness that her own voice had been silenced for years. His confidence triggered her, not because it was wrong, but because it highlighted her own abandonment of self-expression. The shadow, Jung believed, shows up precisely where we refuse to look. And life keeps bringing people to reflect it back to us until we finally face it. Spiritual wisdom lies in using these mirrors not to blame, but to awaken. The shadow is not here to punish. It's here to restore wholeness. Every reaction becomes a revelation. Every judgment becomes a breadcrumb, leading back to the parts of ourselves we've forgotten, abandoned, or been shamed out of. This is how spiritual awakening happens, not by escaping the world, but by allowing our relationships and emotional responses to guide us inward. Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." And in that truth lies power. Because once we see the shadow clearly, it no longer controls us, it liberates us. If this insight into projection and emotional triggers spoke to you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your reflections in the comments below. Let's continue uncovering the hidden layers of the shadow together. 4. Hidden gifts in the shadow. The shadow is not simply a dark closet of shameful traits. It is a reservoir of untapped brilliance. Carl Jung taught us that what we repress is not only our rage or fear, but also our forgotten strengths: creativity, confidence, intuition, sensuality, leadership. These qualities were never bad. They were simply misunderstood, misjudged, or rejected by those who couldn't see their value. And so, we buried them. We dimmed our own light, not because it lacked worth, but because someone told us it was too much. Maybe you were told you were too loud, too emotional, too bossy, too wild, too sensitive. So you learned to be quiet, agreeable, small. But that assertiveness, that artistic spark, that boldness, it never died. It just went underground. This is the truth at the heart of shadow work. Our disowned gifts live beside our wounds. To reclaim the shadow is not only to face what hurts, but to rescue what's powerful. The process of integration isn't about fixing what's broken. It's about welcoming what's been waiting. When you confront the shadow consciously, you reclaim the parts of you that hold true power. Confidence begins to rise not as a performance, but as a grounded knowing. Emotional resilience emerges, not because you've eliminated pain, but because you've stopped running from it. And that voice you silenced for years, it starts to speak again, strong and clear. Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. That is the core of spiritual wisdom. What you ignore within yourself, you project onto others. You admire someone else's courage, but feel unworthy of your own. You envy someone's creativity, not realizing it's the echo of your own buried potential calling you home. Working with your shadow allows you to take that power back. You stop waiting for permission. You stop editing yourself to be digestible. You no longer seek validation because you've remembered who you are. You become whole. And in that wholeness, people feel your presence. They feel your truth. This is not about being perfect. It's about being real. You become more emotionally steady because nothing inside you is being denied anymore. You start showing up with integrity, not performance. There's a natural magnetism in people who own their shadow. They don't chase attention. They carry depth. And the world responds. The hidden gifts in your shadow are not meant to stay hidden. They are meant to be seen, expressed, and lived. And when you begin to reclaim them, you don't just become more of yourself. You become someone who inspires others to do the same. That is the power of spiritual wisdom. Not to escape who you are, but to embody it fully, fiercely, and with love. Do you feel your hidden power awakening? If so, affirm it in the comments. I reclaim my hidden gifts and rise in my true power. And if this message resonated, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone ready to embrace their shadow. 5. Shadow work. How to begin. Shadow work is the sacred act of turning inward to face the parts of yourself that you've hidden, denied, or rejected. It's not about fixing what's broken. It's about uncovering what's been buried beneath shame, fear, or conditioning. Carl Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." This isn't just psychology, it's spiritual wisdom. The path of shadow work is the path of spiritual awakening, because true growth happens when you meet the parts of yourself you were once afraid to love. You don't need to dive into childhood trauma on day one. Start small. Begin by noticing what irritates you during the day. A sarcastic comment that stings more than it should. A compliment you can't fully accept. An unexpected wave of jealousy. These moments are not random. They're invitations. Triggers are emotional messengers pointing you toward deeper layers of your shadow. Instead of pushing the discomfort away, pause and ask, what is this really about? Mindfulness is your first tool. It teaches you to witness your reactions without judgment. When you observe your emotions instead of being consumed by them, you begin to see the beliefs and wounds hiding underneath. Pair this with journaling uncensored, handwritten truth-telling. Not for perfection, but for revelation. Let the page hold what your voice cannot yet say. You may discover your anger masks grief, your control masks fear, or your silence hides shame. The more you write, the more you uncover. The more you uncover, the more you return to your true self. Self-reflection deepens the process. Ask yourself, why did that bother me? What emotion am I resisting? What memory does this feeling remind me of? You're not looking for right answers. You're creating a relationship with the parts of you that have long been ignored. This is how you integrate, not eliminate, the shadow. You realize the things you thought were wrong with you are actually parts of you that never got the chance to be understood. You don't have to do this alone. Shadow work isn't meant to be an isolated struggle. Therapists, coaches, or spiritual mentors can help you navigate the depths without drowning. They offer perspective when your inner critic grows loud or when past pain threatens to shut you down. Guidance brings safety, and in safety, transformation is possible. As Jung also reminded us, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Light without shadow is illusion. Wholeness includes both. This work is messy, non-linear, and often uncomfortable, but it's also liberating. Every trigger faced is a layer peeled back. Every wound tended is a piece of power returned. Shadow work is a spiritual initiation. It doesn't make you someone new. It returns you to who you were before the world told you to be small. This is not just healing. This is remembering. Stay connected with our community of growth and healing by subscribing to our channel. Here, we explore the path of self-awareness, emotional resilience, and inner integration. Remember, every shadow you face is a step closer to wholeness, and you are worthy of that journey. 6. The role of stories and myths. Stories and myths are more than just entertainment. They are the soul's symbolic language, speaking truths our conscious minds often cannot express. Carl Jung believed myths are reflections of our inner world, guiding us through the landscape of the unconscious and showing us the shadow of the parts of ourselves we fear, reject, or deny. In tales like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, we see the catastrophic consequences of repressing those darker impulses. Dr. Jekyll, the socially respectable man, tries to sever himself from his primitive instincts by creating Mr. Hyde. But in trying to destroy the shadow, he loses control to it. Jung warned us that what we repress does not disappear. It festers in the dark and grows stronger until it bursts through in uncontrollable ways. The more we disown our flaws, the more they define us from the shadows. The same dynamic plays out in everyday life. A person who prides themselves on being nice may suppress anger for years until it leaks out as passive aggression, burnout, or explosive outbursts. What we refuse to face eventually shows up in our actions, our relationships, and even our health. Carl Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." These ancient stories aren't distant fantasies. They are psychological mirrors. The villain is never just a monster. He is the unacknowledged part of you, waiting to be understood. In mythology, figures like Loki the trickster represent the chaotic energy that disrupts our carefully constructed identities. He lies, deceives, and turns worlds upside down, not to destroy, but to reveal. Tricksters are symbolic of what Jung called individuation, the process of becoming whole by integrating both the light and the dark. Loki doesn't play by the rules, but through his mischief, deeper truths are revealed. Your inner trickster shows up when your job feels meaningless, your relationships feel fake, or your choices feel dictated by fear. It pushes you to question the version of yourself that's been performing for approval and invites you to meet the self you've abandoned. Chaos, discomfort, and emotional disruption aren't failures. They are invitations. Transformation often begins where control ends. Sarah, a high-performing marketing executive, spent her life being the peacekeeper. She was agreeable, polished, and reliable. But deep down, she felt hollow and furious. Her turning point came when she finally acknowledged the anger she had repressed for years. Working with a Jungian therapist, she realized her niceness was a mask. Her real self was powerful, assertive, and tired of people-pleasing. Integrating her shadow didn't make her mean, it made her authentic. She set firm boundaries, began speaking with conviction, and felt more alive than ever. Her shadow wasn't her enemy. It was her gateway to truth. These stories, whether in books, myths, or your own life, are not just narratives. They are sacred mirrors. They show us what we've hidden from ourselves and ask us to remember that what we repress owns us, but what we accept transforms us. Carl Jung's spiritual wisdom reminds us that we must stop dividing ourselves into good and bad, light and dark. The human soul is all of it. Your shadow holds the creative fire, the emotional depth, the intuition, and the strength you've been searching for. To step into your fullness, you don't need to become someone else. You need to reclaim the parts of you that have been waiting to be seen. Are you beginning to see the wisdom hidden in ancient stories and myths? If you're ready to explore your shadow and unlock transformation through these powerful symbols, comment below. I see the truth in the myth. Let's walk this path of spiritual insight together. 7. The collective impact. Healing society through shadow work. When you heal your personal shadow, you're not just transforming your own life, you're healing a part of the collective wound. The collective shadow isn't some distant abstract force. It lives in the unconscious fabric of society. Racism, sexism, oppression, cultural trauma passed down through generations. Every unhealed fear, every hidden bias, every suppressed emotion adds weight to the larger story of humanity. But when you do the inner work, when you take radical responsibility for your triggers, your projections, and your pain, you begin to loosen the chains that bind us all. Carl Jung believed that self-awareness is a revolutionary act. The more you confront your own darkness, the less you feel the urge to judge or scapegoat others. You stop needing an enemy. You begin to see others through the lens of understanding, not fear. This is how spiritual wisdom manifests, not through preaching, but through presence. Your energy changes. Your choices shift. You become someone who no longer fuels the unconscious systems that divide and dehumanize. Scapegoating is a symptom of collective blindness. When we blame others, our family, a political party, an entire race, we're avoiding our own shadow. It's easier to project pain than to feel it. But spiritual wisdom shows us another way. To meet our wounds with honesty and our past with courage. As you do, you begin to see the subtle connections between personal healing and global transformation. The peace you create inside becomes the peace you carry into conversations, relationships, and communities. True change begins not with grand gestures, but with everyday awareness. You notice your tone when you speak. You pause before reacting. You question your assumptions instead of defending them. Slowly, a new kind of person emerges, someone grounded, open-hearted, and brave enough to break the cycle. This inner revolution doesn't just improve your life, it changes the emotional climate of every room you walk into. That's the power of shadow work, quiet but seismic. Every soul that chooses to awaken becomes a torchbearer. And when enough torches are lit, the collective darkness has no place left to hide. Healing, then, is no longer just personal. It becomes a sacred act of service, a living example of spiritual wisdom in motion. If this message resonates with you, and you're ready to be a part of collective healing, repeat after me. As I heal myself, I help heal the world. I am ready to bring light into the darkness. Type it in the comments to anchor your intention and let this be your quiet revolution. 8. The goal: individuation and wholeness. Individuation, as Carl Jung described, is not about becoming better. It is about becoming whole. It is the courageous act of integrating the light and the shadow within you, the conscious and the unconscious, the strengths and the wounds. This journey is not about chasing perfection or denying pain, but about embracing the totality of who you are. True mental health doesn't come from trying to fix or erase your flaws. It comes from honoring your inner contradictions and letting your complexity breathe. When you begin to accept all parts of yourself, the noble and the hidden, you stop living in conflict with your own being. You stop judging your anger, denying your sadness, or silencing your fear. Instead, you start listening. And in that listening, there is transformation. Because what you reject controls you, but what you accept, you can heal. Jung once said, "I'd rather be whole than good." And this single truth reminds us that spiritual awakening is not about being light all the time, but about holding the darkness with presence. Integration brings emotional freedom. It rewires the way you relate to yourself and others. You no longer need to perform. You no longer need to project your inner wounds onto the world around you. When your shadow is unacknowledged, it leaks out in your reactions, your relationships, your addictions. But when it is seen, owned, and embraced, you gain clarity and power. You stop blaming others for your emotional storms. You start responding instead of reacting. You begin to love without fear, speak without armor, and live without shame. And as this process deepens, your relationships begin to shift. They become more authentic, more intimate, more rooted in truth rather than performance. You attract people who meet your wholeness, not just your highlight reel. The masks fall. The pretenses dissolve. In that rawness, real connection becomes possible. Because now, you're no longer afraid to be seen. You're no longer at war with yourself. This is the silent revolution of individuation. It's not loud or dramatic. It happens in moments of radical honesty, in stillness, in solitude, in self-reflection. It's choosing to look inward instead of outward. It's daring to sit with what hurts and choosing to love yourself anyway. And it is here, in the quiet integration of all that you are, that you awaken. Not to someone else's truth, but to your own. And that is where spiritual wisdom begins. Don't forget to subscribe for more spiritual wisdom on becoming whole through shadow integration, self-acceptance, and the path of individuation. Wholeness isn't perfection. It's the freedom to be fully, authentically you. 9. Practical tools for daily shadow work. Journaling is not just about writing down your day. It's a sacred tool for self-revelation. When you experience emotional triggers like anger, envy, or deep sadness, don't brush them aside. Instead, sit down and write. Let your thoughts pour out without censoring. Ask yourself, what exactly am I feeling? What part of me feels attacked or unseen? As Carl Jung taught, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. These emotional reactions often point to unhealed wounds or repressed truths. By documenting them, you bring light to the hidden corridors of your psyche. You stop running from your emotions and start listening to them. Mindfulness deepens this journey. It's not just about being calm or present. It's about becoming the observer of your inner world. Instead of judging your thoughts or suppressing discomfort, you learn to notice without reacting. You become aware of the stories your mind tells. I'm not good enough. They don't respect me. I have to prove myself. In that awareness, you realize these stories are not you. They're echoes of past pain. Carl Jung reminded us that one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Mindfulness lets you make that darkness conscious, moment by moment, without being consumed by it. Self-reflection invites you to go one step further. Ask yourself, what traits in others trigger me the most? Maybe you resent people who are loud, assertive, overly confident. What if those traits are actually disowned parts of yourself, qualities you were once punished for expressing? You labeled them as bad, so you buried them. But they didn't disappear. They now live in the people who irritate you the most. Shadow work requires brutal honesty. Your judgments of others are often projections of your own shadow. Reclaiming those traits doesn't mean becoming arrogant. It means allowing yourself to be bold, visible, and unafraid. Think of someone at work or in your social circle who gets under your skin. Perhaps they speak up in meetings with unapologetic clarity. You might label them as too much, but deep down, their confidence threatens your comfort zone. Instead of dismissing them, ask, what does this stir in me? The answer may be the very key to a part of yourself that is begging to come alive. Carl Jung called this shadow integration, the process of recognizing and reuniting with the lost pieces of our soul. These tools, journaling, mindfulness, self-reflection, are not quick fixes. They are spiritual practices that over time bring your unconscious into conscious alignment. The more you show up for yourself in these small moments, the more your inner world transforms. You stop being reactive. You start choosing with clarity. You become less fragmented, more whole. This is not just psychological work, it's spiritual awakening. The path to your true self doesn't lie in perfection, but in honest presence with all that you are, including what you've been taught to hide. Carl Jung believed that facing the shadow was essential for individuation, the process of becoming fully yourself. Each trigger becomes an invitation. Each judgment becomes a mirror. And each uncomfortable truth becomes a doorway into deeper self-acceptance. Through consistent practice, shadow work becomes not just a tool, but a way of being rooted in clarity, emotional resilience, and spiritual wisdom. If this message has sparked something within you, anchor your intention in the comments below. I commit to daily shadow work and embrace every part of myself with compassion. 10. Final insight. Embrace, don't erase. Shadow work isn't about fixing or eliminating what we've labeled as bad parts of ourselves. It's about learning to see our full humanity with honest eyes. The fear, the shame, the envy, the rage, these aren't errors in our soul's blueprint. They are messengers. They carry information about our unmet needs, suppressed desires, forgotten dreams, and old wounds. To do shadow work is to stop pretending these parts don't exist and to begin relating to them with compassion instead of condemnation. True healing is not about becoming more perfect. It's about becoming more whole. Spiritual wisdom teaches us that the parts of ourselves we have rejected hold keys to our power. The jealousy we avoid might be pointing to our buried potential. The anger we repress might be the voice of our boundaries begging to be heard. The sadness we deny could be an invitation to slow down and feel again. Every emotion we exile becomes a shadow that grows stronger in silence. But when we turn toward it, speak with it, understand it, it softens. It becomes part of our truth, not something to battle, but something to integrate. As Jung said, there is no light without shadow. We do not become more spiritual by bypassing our pain. We become more spiritual by sitting with it, learning from it, and allowing it to shape us into someone more grounded, more real, more human. There is no badge for healing faster, for staying positive all the time, or for never being triggered. The real work is in staying present through discomfort and choosing curiosity over judgment, even when it's easier to run. The shadow, when embraced, becomes a source of strength. The energy once used to suppress our truth becomes creative fuel. We begin to speak more honestly, connect more deeply, and live with a kind of authenticity that doesn't need to prove anything. We become magnetic, not because we are perfect, but because we are real. And that kind of presence, rooted in wholeness, changes everything. Relationships deepen. Boundaries become clearer. Intuition sharpens. We stop leaking energy into roles and masks that were never ours to wear. This path doesn't have a final destination. It is a spiral one that takes us deeper each time we return to an old emotion with new awareness. With every layer we embrace, we expand. With every truth we allow, we free ourselves. And that is the quiet revolution of spiritual wisdom. To stop performing enlightenment and start living as someone who has made peace with all parts of themselves. Not because it's easy, but because it's real. To affirm your commitment to healing through self-acceptance, declare it in the comments, "I embrace all of me." Let this be your reminder and your message to others that true strength is found in wholeness, not perfection. Thank you for walking this path of inner truth with us today. Remember, the shadow isn't something to fear. It's the doorway to becoming whole. When you face what you've been running from, you reclaim your power and unlock the version of yourself that's been waiting to rise. If this message resonated with you, don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who needs it, and subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom. Tap the notification bell so you never miss a step on your journey of growth, healing, and transformation. See you in the next video. Carl Jung exposed 6 people you should never trust. The brighter the light, the darker the shadow. These powerful words echo Carl Jung's warning. Not everyone who smiles is safe. In today's world, where manipulation often wears a mask of kindness, understanding psychological patterns is no longer optional. It's essential. In this video, we'll explore 6 subtle personality types that Jung believed could quietly dismantle your peace, your energy, and your self-worth. As you listen, reflect on your own relationships and ask yourself, who around me might not be what they seem? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your story could be the wisdom someone else needs. And if you value content that helps you grow, protect your energy, and awaken your spiritual strength, subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom and join a community dedicated to living with deeper awareness and truth. 1. The chronic victim. There are people who wear their wounds like armor, not to protect themselves, but to control you. The chronic victim is one of the most emotionally deceptive personalities Carl Jung warned us about. They never take responsibility for their lives. To them, every hardship is someone else's fault. Every loss is a betrayal. And every relationship is a battlefield where they are always the innocent casualty. Their pain is real, but it's not for healing, it's for power. What makes this pattern dangerous is its ability to cloak manipulation in suffering. The chronic victim doesn't demand power with force. They extract it through guilt. With every sigh, every tear, every passive-aggressive comment like, "I guess I'm just too much," or "No one ever stays," they pull you deeper into their emotional web. You find yourself apologizing for things you didn't do, overextending your energy, and trying to rescue someone who doesn't want to be saved because their identity depends on staying broken. Carl Jung understood that the path to healing requires us to confront and integrate the shadow of the parts of ourselves we reject or deny. But the chronic victim does something far more dangerous. They fuse with their shadow. They no longer see their pain as something to transcend. Instead, they wear it as a badge of identity. Any attempt to hold them accountable is seen as cruelty. Any boundary you set becomes proof that you're just like everyone else who abandoned them. It's a game you can never win, and that's by design. Spiritual wisdom teaches that true transformation cannot occur without personal responsibility. Growth begins the moment we stop blaming the world and start asking what our soul is meant to learn. But the chronic victim isn't on a path of growth. They seek sympathy, not self-reflection. They turn conversations into confessions and relationships into rescue missions. Their suffering becomes a currency they trade for attention, loyalty, and emotional labor, always at your expense. Their charm is subtle, even disarming. They might speak the language of healing using words like energy, trauma, awakening, but it's never applied inward. It's always others who need to change, others who are toxic, others who are the problem. You will rarely hear them say, "Maybe I was wrong," or "What can I do differently?" Because that would require separating from the shadow they've become addicted to. The truth is, staying connected to someone who refuses to take responsibility for their own healing is not compassion, it's self-abandonment. When you pour your light into a person who thrives in darkness, you don't save them. You drown with them. Jung's insight was clear. People don't show you who they are. They show you what they think you'll tolerate. And if you tolerate chronic victimhood, you'll slowly become a supporting character in their endless tragedy. The most powerful choice you can make is not to hate them, fix them, or fight them, but to step back. To recognize that spiritual wisdom isn't just about loving others, it's about discerning when that love becomes self-sacrifice. Not every cry is a call for help. Some are traps. And the deepest form of awakening is realizing when someone's story is no longer your burden to carry. Have you ever dealt with someone who constantly plays the victim to avoid responsibility? If so, share your story in the comments below so others can learn from your experience. If not, comment, "I will stay aware," to affirm your commitment to recognizing emotional manipulation and protecting your peace. 2. The charming mirror, persona trap. They don't love you. They love your admiration. They don't see you. They mirror your light until you confuse their echo with intimacy. The charming mirror is not a person with a soul, but a mask with a strategy. They say what you want to hear, agree with what you believe, reflect your energy back at you like glass, polished and hollow. In the beginning, it feels divine. You think you've met someone who finally understands, finally aligns with your values, your dreams, your spirit. But what you're connecting to isn't them. It's your own projection, expertly reflected back to you by someone who has no solid self beneath the surface. Carl Jung called this illusion the persona, the false identity people wear to survive social life. But for the charming mirror, the persona becomes their only reality. There is no authenticity, only adaptation. They thrive in performance, in the applause of your praise. You feel seen, but it's an illusion. Because the moment your energy shifts when you stop validating, stop clapping, stop needing the charming mirror slips away. Sometimes slowly, with silence. Sometimes violently, with betrayal. Either way, the truth is revealed. They were never really there. Just your reflection wearing a smile. During a spiritual awakening, when you begin to peel away layers of illusion and seek depth over the surface, the charming mirror becomes dangerous. Not because they openly harm you, but because they validate the parts of your shadow that crave approval, attention, and admiration. They make you believe you found alignment, but in truth, you found performance. The more spiritually hungry you are, the more vulnerable you become to this shape-shifting praise. Their charm isn't connected, it's control disguised as chemistry. What makes them so deceiving is the emotional seduction of agreement. They never challenge, never resist, never disrupt your comfort zone. But real connection, real love, real growth, these things require friction, honesty, even discomfort. Jung once said, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls." The charming mirror is the embodiment of that avoidance. They help you run from your own soul by pretending to be its perfect match. But mirrors don't love you back. They don't bleed when you turn away. They vanish. They turn cold. And if you dare to expose their hollowness, they may even punish you for no longer feeding their illusion. That's when the betrayal happens, not because you changed, but because you stopped reflecting what they needed to survive. Spiritual wisdom teaches us that discernment is a form of self-love. Not everyone who flatters your light is meant to walk in it. When someone seems too perfect, too in sync, too quick to praise, pause. Look past the mirror. Ask, is there a soul behind this agreement, or just a mask surviving off my energy? In your spiritual awakening, you must learn to recognize the difference between love and performance, connection and projection, truth and reflection. Because what looks like resonance might just be your own voice echoing back at you from an empty shell. Comment below. I choose real over reflection if you're ready to break free from illusion and connect with truth. And if this message spoke to you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell. More wisdom is on the way. 3. The passive-aggressive enabler. They don't shout. They don't criticize directly. Instead, they wrap their doubts in soft, comforting tones that seem caring at first. The passive-aggressive enabler doesn't want you to think they're holding you back. They want you to believe they're protecting you. But look closer. Their words may sound gentle, but they carry the sharp edge of control. That's brave of you, they say, with a smile that doesn't quite reach their eyes. I just don't want you to be disappointed. It sounds like support, but it's really a seed of doubt, and that seed grows until you hesitate to move, afraid of being too much, too fast, or too bold. Carl Jung understood this kind of behavior as part of the psychological shadow, a hidden force that shapes others without their awareness. These enablers never tell you to stop outright. They slow you down with small phrases, masked concern, and quiet glances that say more than words ever could. They want you to feel like you need them to stay grounded, when in truth, they need you to stay small. Because if you rise, they fade. If you change, they lose control. So they anchor you subtly, feeding you just enough comfort to make you question your own instincts. You may recognize this pattern in someone close to you. A family member who always adds, "Just think it through," after your every decision. A friend who always says, "I'm just being realistic," when you share your dreams. Their presence becomes a voice in your head, not your own, but one you've come to trust. That's how influence works, when it hides under concern. And that's why it's so dangerous. Because you won't resist what you believe is care. But that care is often fear in disguise. Their fear of being irrelevant, unseen, or left behind. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." The passive-aggressive enabler thrives in your blind spot, and unless you confront it, you'll start thinking their voice is your intuition. That's when spiritual wisdom becomes essential, not just knowledge, but insight sharpened by courage. The courage to see clearly. The courage to ask, does this support really uplift me, or does it subtly diminish me? And if you feel drained after speaking to someone who claims to be your biggest supporter, take it seriously. Their role in your life might be more about staying important than helping you grow. Their compliments may come with invisible chains. You don't owe anyone your smallness just because they fear your expansion. Your dreams are not dangerous. Their hidden insecurity is. The moment you see through their concern is the moment you step into power. If you found this message eye-opening, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Let's keep uncovering the subtle forces that shape our self-worth and grow beyond them together. 4. The secret competitor. They smile at you, nod when you win, and tell others how proud they are of your progress. But inside, something entirely different brews. The secret competitor is not your enemy in name, but in energy. They don't throw insults or spread rumors. Instead, they play a far more deceptive game, one Carl Jung would call a projection of their unacknowledged shadow. They copy your ideas, but act like they came up with them. They minimize your success with subtle remarks that sound supportive but feel dismissive. And when life celebrates you, they deflect attention, shifting praise away from you just enough to protect their fragile sense of self. This behavior is not always conscious. The secret competitor may not even fully understand why they feel what they feel. But spiritual wisdom teaches us that energy never lies. What they resent is not your achievements, but the part of themselves you unconsciously awaken, the part they've neglected or denied. Your growth, creativity, and light threaten the identity they've built on being better, smarter, or more ahead. And when you rise, they feel exposed. Instead of confronting this wound, they smile through clenched teeth and hope you stumble because your failure soothes their pain. Jung said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." But the secret competitor isn't ready for that level of self-honesty. They'd rather mimic your strengths than develop their own. They'd rather see you fall than face their fear of inadequacy. And worst of all, when you struggle, they offer help, but beneath their words is relief. You being down gives them room to feel up. They won't say it out loud, but their energy betrays them. Their concern is hollow. Their empathy is laced with silent satisfaction. This kind of person is emotionally and energetically dangerous, not because they are loud, but because they are quiet. They operate behind the curtain, always pretending, always performing. You'll sense it when your wins feel lonely around them. You'll sense it when their support feels forced, when their eyes glaze over as you speak of dreams they secretly wish you never had. And if you ignore this spiritual wisdom, you might start shrinking to keep them comfortable, second-guessing your intuition, mistaking envy for encouragement. The most important thing to understand is that they are not at war with you. They are at war with themselves. But if you're not aware, they'll pull you into that war. You'll lose your focus. You'll question your light. That's why discernment is not just emotional intelligence. It's energetic self-defense. You're not being paranoid when your spirit tells you someone isn't safe. You're being wise. You're listening to the ancient language of energy, the subtle frequency of truth. Not everyone clapping for you wants you to win. Some just want a front row seat to your fall. And some only feel seen when you disappear. Have you ever dealt with a secret competitor? Someone who smiles on the surface but silently hopes you fall? If this message resonates, share your experience in the comments so others can learn from your wisdom. And if you're ready to rise above hidden envy, comment below. I choose to grow, not compete. Let's walk this path of awareness together. 5. The spiritual narcissist, the wise one. The spiritual narcissist, often appearing as the wise one, is not loud, aggressive, or openly critical. Instead, they cloak themselves in gentle speech, healing words, and lofty concepts, using spirituality as a mask for superiority. Their tone is calm. Their language sounds enlightened. But beneath it all is a subtle hunger for control. They don't argue. They dismiss. They don't explode. They invalidate. And when you express doubt, confusion, or emotion, they frame it not as something to hold with compassion, but as proof of your spiritual immaturity. You'll often hear phrases like, "You're still operating from ego," or "That's just your lower self reacting." In these moments, your pain becomes a mirror, not for empathy, but for their self-appointed role as the teacher. But this isn't about the truth. It's about power. Carl Jung warned that the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. The spiritual narcissist hasn't done that work. Instead of integrating their shadow, they've bypassed it with language. They've made their spirituality a performance, not a path. Everything they say is designed to reinforce one thing: their superiority. If you question them, they don't defend with facts or feelings. They simply smile, as if to say, "You're not evolved enough to understand." This is emotional manipulation, dressed in robes of wisdom. You may walk away from them feeling confused, unworthy, or ashamed of your own humanity. That shame is not growth. That discomfort is not your fault. It's a carefully designed effect of their need to be above you. True spiritual awakening is humbling. It allows others to feel safe in their rawness, their questions, their tears. But the spiritual narcissist has no space for your uncertainty. In fact, they thrive on it. Your self-doubt makes their mask shine brighter. They quote ancient wisdom, but cannot tolerate present pain. They preach about ego death, yet defend their image with silent judgment. They will say, "You are triggered," not because they care, but because it recenters them as the one who knows. You'll notice, too, that they rarely express vulnerability. They claim to have transcended suffering, but lack compassion for those still walking through it. Jung taught that one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. The spiritual narcissist avoids that darkness, both yours and theirs. And instead of offering light, they offer illusion. An illusion that sounds like awakening, but is rooted in hierarchy, not harmony. Spiritual wisdom never silences you. It doesn't dismiss your pain as ego or your doubt as failure. It holds you, listens, and reminds you that even confusion is sacred. The moment someone uses spirituality to make you feel small, to make themselves untouchable, know this: it's not awakening, it's performance. And your soul deserves better than that. If today's message opened your eyes to the masks hidden behind spiritual language, leave a comment of truth. I choose real growth over ego. And if this spoke to your soul, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Your clarity may inspire someone else's awakening. 6. The empathic controller. They cry easily, feel deeply, and often speak about energy, intuition, and emotional alignment. At first, it feels like you've met someone truly special, someone in touch with the soul, someone who seems to get you on a level others don't. But slowly, their emotions become your responsibility. You find yourself tiptoeing around their moods, adjusting your tone, your schedule, even your truth, just to keep their emotional state stable. What began as empathy quickly turns into quiet control. You don't want to upset them, not because they lash out, but because they collapse into silence, or subtly withdraw affection, or say, "I'm just so sensitive. You wouldn't understand." This is how the empathic controller operates, not with obvious dominance, but with the quiet demand that everyone accommodate their wounds. Carl Jung warned us about this kind of masked energy. He believed many who identify as empaths aren't actually seeking connection, they're seeking control. Many so-called empaths, Jung noted, are unhealed chaos projecting outward. These individuals haven't integrated their inner wounds. Instead, they weaponize emotional sensitivity to manipulate. They don't ask for mutual support. They expect the world to bend around their unresolved pain. And the more spiritually dressed their language is, the easier it is to confuse their neediness for depth. But true emotional depth doesn't require others to shrink. It allows both people to breathe, speak, and evolve without guilt. In daily life, this might look like a friend who says, "I just need space," every time you share something important. Or a partner who insists your boundaries are an attack on their feelings. You start to suppress yourself to maintain peace, but that peace is one-sided. It only exists if you remain small. The empathic controller thrives in dynamics where they are the center of emotional gravity. Your joy feels like a threat to them. Your strength triggers their insecurity. Their wounds always take priority. And over time, your self-esteem begins to erode, not from direct harm, but from the slow starvation of your own emotional needs. Jung's work on the shadow teaches us that spiritual awakening isn't about appearing good or soft. It's about confronting the hidden parts of ourselves that sabotage real intimacy. And one of the most deceptive shadows is the empathic persona. Because it doesn't scream, it weeps. It doesn't argue, it retreats. But make no mistake, it manipulates all the same. Not out of malice, but out of deep, unhealed fear. That fear becomes a strategy, and the strategy becomes a trap. When someone always needs you to understand them, but never seems to understand you, when you feel emotionally responsible for someone else's peace, that's not connection, that's captivity. And no amount of spiritual language makes that dynamic healthy. Healing doesn't mean others must suffer to keep you calm. Emotional maturity doesn't require self-erasure. Real empathy isn't about controlling energy. It's about coexisting in it. That's the difference Jung urges us to see. True spiritual wisdom lies in knowing when kindness becomes self-sacrifice and when empathy becomes emotional manipulation. To reclaim your emotional space and honor your healing, comment below, "I choose clarity over chaos." Let this be your declaration of growth and a reminder that true empathy doesn't demand your peace as payment. Thank you for watching today's video. As Carl Jung revealed, the greatest threats are often hidden behind charm, helpfulness, and false kindness. Recognizing these subtle patterns is not just about protecting yourself. It's about honoring your energy, your boundaries, and your spiritual growth. If this message resonated with you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom. And be sure to turn on notifications so you never miss our upcoming insights on energy, psychology, and spiritual awakening. Until next time, stay aware, stay grounded, and trust your inner wisdom.